5, INK, and we will pick up from the bottom of 74B, about 5 lines from the bottom, the first wide line. Let's see. Actually, the second last narrow line, which is quoting from what we said before. Gufa. We said before, Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav, Modem Knas V'achar Kach Bo'edim Pater. If you, according to Rav Huna, we saw this dispute yesterday, if you admit to something that causes a fine, so then you're off the hook for the fine, because you admit it. But then afterwards, what if witnesses come? So we had a dispute. Rav Huna said that once you're off the hook, you're off the hook. Even if witnesses come afterwards, you exempted yourself by your admission. Rav Chisda asked, Masi Roman Gamliel, the story of Roman Gamliel, Shasimas Ein Tevi Avdo. He blinded, presumably unintentionally, blinded the eye of his slave Tevi. And he was very happy about this. Why was he happy? Because now he could set Tevi free. There's a number of stories elsewhere in the Gemara that Tevi was held in very high regard by his master Rabbi Yehuda, but he didn't want to free him because, in his view, there's a prohibition against freeing a Canaanite slave. The Olam Bahem Tava, they will serve you forever, which is taken to mean that it's forbidden to free them. But in the case where you put out their eye, then you're required to free them. So he was very happy that he could, presumably he wasn't happy about the blindness, I hope, but he was happy that he could free it. It's all Rabbi Yeshua. He found Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua said to me, he's like, guess what? Tevi Avdo, my servant, is going to be set free. Amarlo, he says, why? Because I blinded him. Amarlo, there's like you're not saying anything. Shekvar ein lo edim. If there were no witnesses, then you're admitting that you put out his eye, and it's a knas, and the knas is canceled if you admit it. If there were witnesses, so it implies that you would still have to pay the fine by letting him free, right? So this point seems to dispute Rav Huna. Sounds like if witnesses came afterwards, then you would have to pay the knas. So you could derive from that. That seems to indicate that if you admit to a fine and then Adim come afterwards, then you become obligated again. So the answer is not necessarily Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel didn't admit to this before a court. That's when you're off the hook for the fine, when you admit to it in court. And that's why if witnesses would come, you would be liable again. Vaha Rabbi Yeshua based in Hava. Well, he's telling the story to Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua was the Av basing, so he is admitting it in court. Shlomo based in Havakai. They were walking on the street. It wasn't in a formal court setting. Okay. Vaha Tanya. But we have a brisa. Amarlo embid v'rachal. So Rabbi Yeshua said to him, "You're not saying anything. Shekvar hodesa, because you already admitted my love to Naihi." So isn't this exactly the point of the machlokas we had yesterday? The one that has the version that says that you have no witnesses. He holds that that would require him to pay afterwards if Adim came. The one that reads the brisa saying that you have already admitted, that implies that since you already admitted it, then you're off the hook. Then that would accord with the Tana that says that you remain pater forever. So pater. So the Gemara says, no, not necessarily. Maybe that's not the what's at the bottom of this discussion. Maybe everybody holds that you remain off the hook forever. But what are they arguing about with the two versions of the story? The one that says that you have no witnesses, was what Rabbi Yeshua said to him. He holds that was taking place outside of the court. So it's not a moda b'knas situation. So that's why when Eidim come, he's chayiv again. The one that puts the words in the mouth of Rabbi Yeshua that says since you have already admitted and therefore you're potter, therefore you don't have to pay the knas and let him free. Savar, he holds that when Rabbi Gamliel told the story to Rabbi Yeshua was acting in this official capacity as the Av Beis Din, so it is a case where he admitted in court, and therefore he is then off the hook. Okay. Itmar, continuing this discussion. A person who admits to something that requires him to pay a fine, and then afterwards witnesses come to testify about it. Rav Amar Pater, Shmuel Amar Chayev. So Rav says he's off the hook still, and Shmuel says no, now he becomes liable again. Amar Rav Bar Ahilai, Rav says, my Tama to Rav, what's Rav's reason? Im himatzei be'edim timatzei b'dayanin. So the pasuk is im himatzei timatzei b'yadar gneva. This is the pasuk of kefel, which is a knas, where you pay double what you stole if you're caught. So the Torah uses a double language, im himatzei timatzei b'yado. If it uses this word found twice, so im himatzei, we interpret be'edim, he pays the fine when there are witnesses, and timatzei b'dayanin. Or when there are witnesses, then he can be assessed for the fine by the judges. So, but what's missing from this formulation? If you admit it, you accuse yourself. In other words, you admit what you did. So that is not included in the kefel. Lamali. Why do I need this? Why do I need this this derivation from that pasuk? Nafka me asher yarshiyun. It continues to say asher yarshiyun Elohim yishalim shnayim l're'ehu. When the person is found guilty, he has to pay double. So doesn't that teach you that only you pay double if you're found guilty in court? So that's telling you that, that the kefel is only assessed in court. What the additional thing of timatzei is telling you is even when there's that there's an exclusion for when you had originally admitted it yourself, and then there's a court case. That still excludes the liability when you've admitted. So that's Rav's derivation. Shmuel who says that no, that you become liable again. Amalach, he would say that is talking about the actual thief. So the context of the pasuk is if you steal from somebody by not fulfilling your obligation to guard his thing. So if someone appoints you as a shomer and you basically steal the thing, then you're liable. That's the context. So Shmuel says what the extra language is telling you is not only that case, but just the case where there's no shomer relationship involved. If one person steals from another person, that is the same ruling, that if you admit it, you're off the hook. That's what this tells you. As was taught by Chizkiah, which we saw earlier. Basically, Rav Shmuel. So Rav challenges Shmuel. If you see that the witnesses are coming to court. And then you figure, well, I'm going to be in trouble here. If they testify against me, then I'm going to have to pay the fine. So I'm going to admit it. I admit stealing, but I don't admit the slaughtering, which would incur an extra fine. So anyway, then yeah, you're off the hook because you admitted the theft. Then there's no fine applies at all. Amarle, 1 second. So the way this case is set up, it's like there are witnesses um, coming. You admit it, and you're off the hook. But how does that help you if when the witnesses come, you'll be on the hook again? Right? So it must be that even once you've admitted, that exempts you from paying even after witnesses come. Otherwise, it makes no sense. Shmuel answers, what are we talking about? Kagon, that the witnesses never actually proceeded to testify. Um, you saw them coming, you admitted, they went home. So in that case, we're not talking about a case where the witnesses came afterwards. Indeed, according to Shmuel, if the witnesses had continued and delivered their testimony, you would have been liable for everything. I mean, the Tani Sefer, but wait a minute, look at the end of that brisa. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Yavo Eidim V'Yaidim. Let the witnesses come and testify. Like, what do I care if they come and testify? It won't have any effect. Or no, sorry, yeah, let them come and testify. And then you'll be off the hook, Michlal, the Tana Kamma Savar Lo. So since this is something that Rabbi Elazar is adding, it means he's arguing with the Tana Kamma, and the Tana Kamma must be that the Tana Kamma would be disputing that by saying that you are off the hook if witnesses come afterwards. Only Shmuel, and Shmuel says to Rav, Lav Ika Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, Tekai Kavasi. So don't you see that Rabbi Elazar is supporting me? Ana Damri Karebi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, and I'm saying like him. L'Shmuel Vadak Tanai. Now, so according to Shmuel, yeah, that's what this Bryce is saying, that there is a dispute in between the Tanaim. Rav Milei Tanai. Maybe Rav doesn't agree that this is Machlokas Tanaim. Rav, so Rav could say, because he could say, Anada Amri Afil Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. No, I could. You don't have to explain that brisa as arguing about the same thing we're arguing about. I could even say that I agree with Rabbi Elazar. Adkan lo kama Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon hasam ela mishum dekamode machmas biyasusa de'edin. Maybe this is a special case because we don't take your admission as seriously as we otherwise would have, because we see that you're only admitting because you're afraid that witnesses are coming. But if it's a real case of you're coming forward sincerely and not trying to just evade the system, I feel Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon mode, that maybe Rabbi Elazar would agree that that you remain patur after a sincere admission, even with Adim come afterwards. Amar Rav Hamnuna says, Mistabra milse derav ba'omer ganafti ubo edim shaganav pater. It makes sense that what Rav is saying is, as we expect, a person says that I stole something, and then witnesses come and say, yeah, he stole something. Then he has exempted himself by his original admission. Shaharei chiyav asmo v'keren, because by his admission, sure, he doesn't have to pay the fine, but he has to pay back the principal, what he stole. Avalamar lo ganafti, but a person says, I didn't steal. And witnesses came. And then he says, okay, fine, you got me. I did steal. And you know what else? I admit that I did tvicha mechira, that I slaughtered it and sold it. And then witnesses come that confirm that. You'd be liable shari pater atzmo miklum, because you haven't he didn't exempt himself from paying any principal. So in the case as we've set up this way, once he's already been convicted of theft, so he has to pay the fine, but also the principal. Now, if he admits to tvicha mechira, he's not there's no principal involved, right? The principal's already been paid back. Now we're only dealing with the fine. So then, if witnesses come and confirm his admission that he saw that he should still be chayav. Okay, the exemption doesn't apply anymore. He's positing, according to Rob, the exemption wouldn't apply anymore if there's no question of paying back the principal. The principal's already been paid back. If it's only the fine that you're letting yourself off of, then the witnesses can obligate you to pay the fine if they come. Rava, but Rava answers back. Hipachti l'saved b'nei Rav. I've refuted what they said. The case of Rabban Gamliel and the slave, right? He was getting himself off the hook for paying anything, right? Because there's not like there's a Karen. It's not like there's something you're paying back. You're letting the slave free, but it's not like you had an obligation to do so. There's no Karen in that case, no principle. But Rav Chizda asked that, brought that case as a challenge to Rav Huna, and Rav Huna didn't answer that the P'tur doesn't apply in the case of where there's no Karen. So it must be that's not a valid rejoinder. But we also have another statement that will agree with Rav Hamnuna's interpretation of Rav. That if there's no Karen, then you lose the exemption if witnesses come. If I admit that I stole, and then witnesses come and confirm that, Potter, you're off the hook because Karen. And here he says explicitly, because I have not only admitted to the fine, but I've obligated myself to pay the principal of all Amar Lagana, but in the case where I deny it, and the witnesses come and say I did it, and then I say, okay, fine, I did it, but then I admitted and then more witnesses came and said and confirmed that, you're still liable in that case. You don't get the exemption because there was no Karen involved. So we've confirmed that interpretation or that detail that Rav would agree. Amar Bashi. Here's another support for that. Masnisin Brisa Namideka. You can also see that in the Mishnah and the Brisa. Masnisin has in the Mishnah, it's none. Ganav al Pishnayim. If the theft was testified to by two witnesses, this was the first case in our Mishnah, and then the Tvicha Mechira was only confirmed by one witness, or by an admission, his own admission, then Mishalim Tishlumi Kefil, you pay Kefil, the double payment, Knas. Mishalim Tishlumi Chamisha, not the 4 or 5 times payment. Lamali Datane Ganav al Pishnayim. Now, why do I need the Mishnah to set it up this way that there was two witnesses for the theft itself? Litne Ganav B'tavach Umachar al Pi Echad al Pi Atzmo. Like, set it up so that the whole case was only through admission or through one witness. Then Einam Shalom Ela Karen. Then you don't pay any fine. You only pay the principal. What's it telling us? By setting it up this way, that the theft itself was confirmed by witnesses, but not the Tvicha Mechira. That's when you don't have to pay the principal. That's when we say that admission is like one witness. Just as if there's only one witness. If a second witness came to corroborate, then that would be valid testimony, and he would be liable. Mechayev, he becomes liable. Al pi atzmo name. So it's setting up as a parallel that even when it's by your own admission that you sold or slaughtered, kiyasu edim mechayev. If witnesses come afterwards, then you become obligated again. But where the whole case is with one witness or by admission, the chiyuv asma b'keren, where your admission makes you liable for the principal, then you don't say that, but rather, if witnesses come afterwards, you are patur. And Brisa, and where do we see this in the Brisa? The Tanya, Ra'edim shemashamshin uvayin. The Brisa had said, if you saw the thief saw that there were witnesses on the way, V'yamar ganavti avol tavachti b'ol macharti, and so he admits to the theft, but not to the tvicha mechira. And mishalom elikaron, he only pays the principal. Why do I have to set up the cases where he admits just the theft, but not the tvicha mechira? Nitne ganavti o tavachti macharti. He in either case, if he said if he admitted to stealing or slaughtering or selling, ela kamashmalan was telling us the amar ganavti hudachayev atzmo b'keren patur. When he says I stole it, then the admission is valid because he is obligating himself not only in the fine but in the principal. So then it works to obligate yourself in the fine. But if he denies, but the way we set it up, where he denied the theft and then witnesses confirmed that he stole, and then he admitted in the tvicha mechira, but that didn't obligate him in the keren because you already have to pay the keren. He didn't obligate himself in the principal. Then you would be chayav. Then the admission doesn't help you with getting off the hook for the fine. So we see that the admitting just to the slaughtering is not an admission that gets you off the hook for the fine. Amrei, so the Gemara rejects this. Lo, you don't have to say that. Higu for kamash malan. The Brisa is telling us this case is to tell us the kevan de amar ganavti, since he said I stole it, you admitted stealing it. Afagav de amar lo tavachti lo macharti. Even if you deny this subsequent slaughtering or selling, ubo edim shel machar, and then that was confirmed by edim pater, you're still exempt by tama. Why? Tashlimi arba v'chamisha amar Rachmana, v'lo tashlimi arba v'lo tashlimi shlosha. It's like the when the Torah specifies a 4 or 5 times payment, it's like if you've already been obligated in kefel in the double payment, then how much is left if you end up being obligated in 4 or 5? Only 2 or 3 times more, right? Because you already paid, or 3 or 4 times more, because you've already paid the double payment, right? So, and the Torah is telling you that you only pay the 4 or 5 in the case where you become obligated in the entire 4 or 5 times, but not where it's a 2-pronged thing where you've already paid the double, then you don't pay. We don't have you pay the knas later because of later developments in the case of 3 or 4 more times. Okay, Lema Katanai. Maybe this is a machukas tanaim. Here's a brisa. Hayu shnaim me'idim shaganav. You have witnesses that say you stole. Hayu shnaim me'idim also shetov machar. 2 other witnesses saying that you slaughtered or sold. Who's mu'ede geneva? The first set that say that you had stolen, we become zomin edu shavat l'mitzvah bat lakula. Then we have no basis to believe that you stole. So we can't act on the tvicha mechira testimony. Who's waiting tvicha? But if the second set of witnesses that spoke about the tvicha mechira became zomin hu mishalim testimony kefel, and the first set, that doesn't affect their testimony, right? They're testifying about the original act of stealing, and they're good witnesses. So v'hein mishalim testimony shlosha And so what do the Eidim Zomim pay? What were they what were they putting you at jeopardy for? So you've already been proven by other witnesses that you're Chayav Kefil, right? And they're trying to make you pay Arba Chamisha, which is an increase of 3 or 4 times the value, right? So that is what the Eidim Zomim are liable for, 3 or 4 times the value. So you can see where we're going with this. So that apparently that view does not accept the idea that the Torah will only make you pay the full 4 or 5, but not the makeup between the kefil and the 4 or 5. One second, I lost my place. I mean, Shum Sumchus Summer, but Sumchus was quoted as saying, "Hein Mishalim Tashlumi Kefil, Vihu Mishalim Tashlumi Shloshal Apar Ushnayim La'ayil." You pay 3 more for the ox, or and 2 more for the sheep. A high kai simchus. What's simchus talking about? Elam Aresha, he's talking about the first case. Lay slay l'simchus edu shabbat l'misasa bat l'kula. Like can like it makes no sense. Like if you've undermined the part of the testimony that says you stole it in the first place, then the whole case is turned over. So it can't be that. Simchus must be talking about the end of the brisa. Shapir Kamma Rabbanan who mishalim tashlumi kefil mishalim tashlumi shlosha. Then he's agreeing with what the first Tana said. He's not saying anything different. Ella milsach risa yikabei now. They're arguing about something else. Kigon dasu beitrei amre le ganaft. 2 witnesses came and say you stole something. Amre hu in ganafti v'tavachti umacharti. And then you say, yes, I admit it, or you're correct, I stole. And guess what else? I also did tvicho mechira. Miu lo bifnechem ganafti, but I didn't do it. You didn't witness when I stole it. Like it, he's denying that the testimony is valid testimony. Okay, and then those witnesses become Eidim Zomim. And then the owner of the guy who was stolen from brings other witnesses, and then they testify that the same thing, that you stole and you slaughtered. So now, what's the status of your statement? When you admitted, you said to the first witnesses, you are correct that I stole, but you can't have been the witnesses. And then they became Zomim. It's true, they couldn't have been the witnesses. They weren't there. But then other witnesses, valid witnesses, come. So what's the status of your admission? So what Sumchus and the Tanna Kamma are arguing about is, in this case, the admission of the Tvicho Mechira. The rabbis, the Tanna Kamma says, even though his initial admission was because of witnesses, and so he shouldn't be, that shouldn't get him off the hook. But the admission of Tvicha Mechira that those first witnesses didn't say anything about, they only said you stole. And then he admitted, yeah, I stole. Okay, so that admission doesn't help you. But the admission of Bava Chamisha, of Tvicha Mechira, that does help you. The Sumchus Savar Kevin Digneva Machmas Eidim who the Kamoda, but Sumchus says no, since your original admission was because witnesses came, the Tvicha Lav Hoda, and admitting to the Tvicha Mechira isn't a valid admission because it doesn't make, there's no Karen involved anymore. So the first witnesses who became Zomim, they pay Kefil. And the guy, the thief, pays the rest of the 4 or 5, meaning the 3 or 4 times. Fine. So the Tanna Kamma says that the admission gets you off the hook for the fine, even if it didn't oblige you to pay the principal, whereas Sumchos says that it does not make you part. But more rejects that. Amar Bacha, great Ravika. Look, not so. Maybe everybody in this brisa holds that the second part of the admission of Tficha Mechira doesn't count, because it was before either because it was before Eidim or because there was no Karen involved. Ella, but what are they arguing about? Eidu's testimony that is impossible to become for them to become zomin. So the case could be that the Bryce is talking about witnesses came and said you stole. Yeah, I admit that you're right. I stole, and guess what? I also slaughtered or sold it. But not, you can't be testifying because you weren't there. El bifnei ploni uploni. You know who was there? Reuven and Shimon were there. They saw me steal it. So then the thief brings other witnesses to make the first eight witnesses zomin. And then Reuven and Shimon come along and say, yeah, you know what? We were indeed the witnesses of the theft and the Tvicha Mechira. Now, this is what the argument is. The Tanna Kamma says this is edus that cannot be, you can't make them zomim. Why is that? Because they can't be liable for they're not effectively trying to make you liable for something that you could pay for because you're already admitting it. And that's not valid testimony. The Sumcha Savar and Sumcha says, no, we do count this testimony because he doesn't have that principle. But doesn't everybody agree that this is not valid testimony? Like that's a general rule. So Sumchus would say, okay, that's when the witnesses don't know what day or what time it happens. So that there's what he says is edus edus which you don't give the relevant details that would allow you to become an Eid Zomim, right? In other words, you have to say where and when this happened, that you saw it, right? And that can be contradicted by Hazama. But if you don't testify that at all, then that testimony is not valid. But here, it's like that's not the case. Like you're finding a technical reason that you can't make them pay for where you can't give them the fine of what they were trying to make you lose. That's a technicality. That's not a problem with the witness, with the testimony itself. So that's where he differs from the principle. Amar, we said before, the Edim Zomim pay the double. Of Karen Ba'ishlume, since the thief admits that he has to pay the principal, so it's like only the second half, like the extra payment of Kefel that the Zomim should have to pay, not the full 2 times, right? They shouldn't have to pay the Karen. The Karen, the guy was going to have to pay anyway. Amar B'Lasser Mishmei Derav. So Rabbi says, Tane, you have to interpret it, Tashlum de Kefel. Yeah, that's actually what it means. When it says the Edim Zomim have to pay double, it doesn't mean they have to pay 2 times the value. It means they have to pay the Kefel part, like the last part, the doubling of the Karen. In other words, the thief himself pays the Karen, and the Edim pay equivalent to the Karen, which makes up the Kefel. Okay, so we can call it here, and David will pick up tomorrow. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.